Chapter 14. Unravelling Reality. The little toy shop sits in silence, and the sounds of the abating rain only softly penetrate the quiet room. A muffled conversation and laughter come nearer from the outside. The electronic locks of the entrance door click open and the door opens, letting in rain and wind.
That's a nice way of putting it. I like it.
Geppettia's voice sounds into the shop as she enters.
Yeah, the path to chaos is paved with order. Does have a ring to it.
Evelyn agrees, shaking her wet hair. Water drops spill on the floor as she removes her coat.
Well, order needs chaos.
Geppettia explains.
There's no order without its counterpart.
Jeppy, don't get philosophical on me.
Evelyn waves aside Geppettia's thoughts. She admires her mentor for her philosophical mind, but Evelyn's thoughts are much more direct and real. She wants to unlock the secrets of the cube.
Welcome back, Master.
Eddie's sonorous voice sounds from the ceiling.
Dreadful weather, is it not?
I told you yesterday.
Geppettia points her finger at Eddie's half-dome, satisfied that her itching leg was superior in predicting today's weather.
Lucky guess.
Eddie shoots back, having already determined the probabilities of its master's chances. Meanwhile, Evelyn activates the inlaid monitor and addresses the AI on the ceiling.
So, where do we stand with the data, Eddie?
She asks, flipping through the data structures. Most directories are shown in green, except for the quarantined files in red that Geppettia stored away.
Wow, all done?
Evelyn asks in surprise.
You're quick on the draw, Eddie.
Evelyn congratulates the AI on its quick work. The AI remains silent. Geppettia looks up from the screen and senses that something is wrong. Eddie is usually talkative. His silence does not bode well.
Eddie?
Geppettia asks softly.
Yes, Master.
Come on, quit beating around the bush.
She says, rubbing her nose with the back of her hand.
What do we have here?
Eddie chooses his words carefully.
It is quite disturbing, Master.
Okay.
Geppettia cautiously responds, waiting for her AI to continue.
I have rearranged the file system for easier reference. You can verify all of my conclusions on the data manually, if you wish.
Eddie explains apologetically.
Eddie, don't play with us.
Geppettia snaps.
Give us what you found.
Geppettia orders her AI with a strict voice. After a moment's silence, the AI reports his findings on the cube's data.
The cube contains a total of 7,857 recoverable files. 1,417 files were quarantined as a possible security risk. The remainder of the files is audio and video clips. The earliest clip dates from the 5th of the 4th moons, 2057. 5 days ago, partly overwritten memory modules suggest regular data transfer.
Eddie pauses before he presents his conclusion.
The cube was apparently implanted in an arm clip as a secret surveillance tool.
Yes, we suspected something like that.
Geppettia agrees, glancing at Evelyn, who nervously scratches her wrist. Watching Evelyn closely, she asks Eddie,
Is the data conclusive about the owner of that arm clip?
Oh, more than conclusive.
Eddie loses his initial restraint and now readily shares more information.
The arm clip belongs to Raylan Winslow Jr. Video stills evidence as well as audio confirmation. Latest public voice sample at a university speech on the 9th of 4 moons. Determined.
The rush of blood to Evelyn's face replaces the AI's sonorous voice with a searing, high-pitched buzz in her ears.
Raylan's arm clip?
Her eyes shoot up to the silvery half-dome on the ceiling. A dizzy spell overcomes her, and she leans against the counter. Her mind attempts to navigate the consequences of this revelation without drowning in madness.
You seem upset.
Geppettia softly states. Evelyn sees Geppettia's lips move, but nothing can penetrate the enervating ringing in her ears. Geppettia looks back at Eddie and nods.
Everyone knows Raylan.
She tells her AI.
She was in a triple with him some time ago.
Yes, there are a few instances where this is mentioned in the audio clips. Oh dear, this must be upsetting.
Eddie says emphatically. Slowly, the ringing in Evelyn's ears subsides, and she catches Eddie's last words.
You can say that.
Evelyn grunts and covers her face with her hands. She takes a deep breath and recalls Arya's warm smile after Evelyn opened up to her.
Why not? Can't be worse than it is now.
She sighs to herself as she faces Geppettia.
It's an old friend of mine. We're in a triple with Arya before she split.
Everin recalls their last weeks with Raylan and Arya all too well.
You met them both yesterday at the university?
Everin refers to their meeting with Pico.
Yes, I remember them.
Jepedia says.
You three make a nice triple.
Jepedia comforts her with small talk, carefully keeping Everin on track.
Anyway, Raylan works for Winslow Security. That arm clip, it was found after an ECOS mission.
Everin looks at her mentor in uncertainty about how she would take the lie.
Is that not highly probable?
Jepedia shrugs her shoulders.
Someone working in security would be present at a site of criminal activity.
She concludes matter-of-factly.
No, Raylan is no mere field agent.
Everin tells her.
He is top brass in Winslow Industries.
Go on?
Jepedia encourages her gently. This piece of information lets Jepedia deduce the only valid option, ignoring all improbable solutions for now.
If he was there, what was he doing there?
Everin could not fit the final piece.
If not for Winslow Industries, then maybe against?
Offering her read on the available information, she leans back and folds her arms.
Against Winslow Industries?
Everin is stunned.
Ray's with the ECOS?
She feels that Raylan never let her into his life after all. As close as they were, she apparently never met the real Raylan. Angrily, she attacks his mental image.
For the God's sake, Ray.
She thinks, outraged at the implications.
I work for you guys. Doesn't that mean anything to you?
She feels abandoned and betrayed.
Why didn't you let me know?
Torn between anger and fascination, she concedes that Jepedia is right. She spells out the indisputable conclusion.
Raylan works for the ECOS.
Evren's image of the gentle, mindful Raylan has taken a heavy blow.
For, or with, the ECOS?
Jepedia asks.
What?
Well, his presence may not have been voluntary. They could have forced him.
The surveillance data indicates otherwise.
Eddie buds in.
I have selected the files in question.
The AI adds. The screen in the counter springs to life and simultaneously displays 5 video feeds. One video shows the storage house behind the cafe in Little Marinth. Taryn, Saren, and Raylan are sitting at a table, tinkering with electronic components.
I can add the audio transcripts if you like.
Eddie's voice echoes through the silent room.
No thanks, I can see.
Jepedia screens the video feeds and watches as Raylan talks to Taryn, agitated and nervous.
Poor crow.
Jepedia sighs as she contemplates Raylan's fate. Everin frowns at her mentor.
Why?
She snaps.
Because he works with the ECOS?
Her voice hardens. She does not want pity for her friends. Jepedia smiles sadly in response.
No, dear.
She sighs.
That's not it.
She touches Everin's shoulder as she walks by toward the back room.
This you'll have to figure out for yourself. I'll attend to Pico in the back. That boy must be fully charged by now.
Everin is perplexed and watches Jepedia open the drapes to the back room.
Figure out what?
She thinks confused.
Ray is a member of the ECOS. So?
Her anger over Raylan's betrayal dissipates as she stares at the videos showing her friend talking to Taryn and Saren.
Think surveillance.
The logical Everin invites her to answer critical questions.
Who put the cube into the arm clip? Siphon.
She answers her own thought.
Who is always close to Ray and can draw the data? Siphon.
She again concludes. Slowly, Everin unravels her blind spots about Raylan's situation.
Siphon works for Winslow Security, just like Ray. If she knows, why is Raylan not in prison?
At her conclusion, she inhales sharply through clenched teeth and a loud hiss echoes through the shop. Hearing the sharp sound, Jepedia calls out from the back room.
Yes, as I said, your friend is a poor soul, fighting for a cause and destroying it at the same time. That's tragic.
Jepedia's face appears, and she nods at Everin.
I'll leave you to yourself for a while. I'll take care of Pico. I want to make sure he doesn't strain himself too much.
She draws the drapes close and leaves Everin standing at the counter, staring at the video feeds that still run on the screen.
Shall I stop the videos?
Eddie's quiet voice sounds out.
Yes, thanks.
Everin draws a stool near and sits down in front of the screen, her head resting in her hands. She sighs and recalls how excited she was to find out what the cube holds.
Reality sucks.
Her verdict encompasses her deep frustration about the whole cube thing. Defiantly, she sits upright and fixes the screen.
There has to be something in it for me.
She attempts to invigorate her self-reliance and sense of greed.
Eddie, help me out here.
She pleads to the AI.
How may I be of assistance?
You said the data are disturbing. What do you mean?
Everin looks up from the screen and awaits the AI's answer.
Well, first there is the fact that Raylan Winslow Jr. is obviously an upper echelon member of a local crime organization called Western Lasses Section. There seem to be other sections on the continent. I would say this is extremely disturbing.
Yes, it is. But not so improbable for you to call it disturbing.
Touche, Everin.
So, spill the news. What's the disturbing part?
Everin braces herself and feels a remote sense of déjà vu, the feeling of devastation and waiting for another, final blow. She folds her arms before her and gazes down at the screen.
I'd really like my master to be present. You may find her presence comforting.
Eddie's cryptic answer puzzles Everin. Annoyed by the AI's stubborn secretiveness, Everin frowns at the AI's half-dome and chides it between clenched teeth.
Eddie, I'm not Pico. Just tell me.
Yes, Eddie, tell her. And Pico will listen in too.
Gepedia suddenly interjects, standing in the opening with Pico next to her. She must have overheard Eddie's comment.
Yes, master.
The AI's voice exudes relief.
As I said, Raylan Winslow is a key member of the terrorist organization Ecos on Lasses. His position at Winslow's security makes him a unique and valuable asset.
You son of an Amma.
Everin begins to grasp how stressful Raylan's life must have been all this time, always on the brink of disaster.
However,
Eddie pauses for effect, which makes Gepedia raise her eyebrow at his theatrical behavior.
he is unaware that Winslow's security uses him to infiltrate the Ecos.
Another pause, and there it was, the final blow. Everin's world rapidly shrinks towards singularity, minimized into a single point of existence. The last sentence
The controlling operative is a Len named Cyphrin Chirna.
fails to reach her ears. Everin's slender body sinks to the floor in one fluent motion, her head barely missing the stool.
Oh dear.
Eddie exclaims. Gepedia rushes in, but Pico already caught Everin's fall. The small puppet eases her down to the floor, its servomotors straining under the weight. Gepedia takes over and kneels beside Everin, bracing her head carefully against her thigh. She feels Everin's shallow breathing and relaxes a little.
Pico, be a sweetie and get me the pillow from the bed, would you?
Pico stands next to her, holding a pillow.
What the?
Gepedia is stunned. She did not even see Pico dash into the back room.
Pico is not only a quick thinker, master.
The pride in Eddie's voice is unmistakable. Gepedia rests Everin's head on the pillow and feels her pulse.
How'd you know? She wouldn't take it too well.
She asks of Eddie as she watches her young friend's face intently. Everin's closed eyes emanate peace and tranquility, but her eyelids sometimes twitch irregularly.
The video and audio files suggest a deep emotional bond between Raylan Winslow Jr. and Everin. It seemed logical that the revelation would strain her emotional corset, but
Emotional corset.
Gepedia interrupts and looks up at Eddie.
Yeah, she has a really big one.
She recalls the little tidbits that Everin shared about her social life.
She never really commits.
She muses about Everin's strictly individual way of life.
master, there is something else.
Eddie interrupts her thoughts.
The data suggests that Everin, she still works for the Ecos.
Eddie quickly finishes its sentence. Gepedia is taken aback.
Really?
She reaches for the stool and sits down. She believes in Eddie's conclusion. She only needs time to digest the new information. She has had hopes that Everin would cut her ties with the Ecos.
This is way out of your league, young Len.
Gepedia sighs to herself, looking at Everin's unconscious body. She can tolerate Everin's endeavors beyond the fringes of the law. She herself found this sector very lucrative. But the Ecos, that kind of attention puts the ATC on the playing field. And now they have Everin in their sights, and all their friends.
I'm too old for this shit.
She grunts and braces her broad arms on her knees. The even rise and fall of Everin's chest calms Gepedia's thoughts. She watches as Pico carefully applies a damp cloth over Everin's forehead. Her AI draws her back to the present.
How is she?
She'll come to in a minute.
Gepedia replies.
Let's hope it's the Evren we know.
Evren hears someone calling her name, but she is too afraid to open her eyes yet. She senses that reality still waits to pounce on her again. The hard floor presses against her shoulders and a leathery smell rises from the pillow. She feels a damp, cold cloth on her forehead and instinctively reaches up to remove it.
There you are.
Gepedia softly murmurs and helps her up to sit on the floor. Evren rests against the counter and greets Pico quietly.
Hey, Pico. Sorry about that.
She smiles weakly.
Hello, Evren. Why sorry? You are hurt. Not me.
Pico reassures her.
Quite a day, eh?
Gepedia pats Evren's shoulder. Evren pulls her legs up and claps her arms around her knees. She rests her head back against the counter and looks up at Gepedia.
I don't know if I can take this.
Evren says with tears in her eyes. Her future seems uncertain at best. Everything has changed. Again. She recalls the events from her school days that turned her life upside down.
I'll have to leave.
She says.
Pack up my things and go.
Go where?
Pico inquires neutrally, its eye sensors squarely fixed on Evren.
I don't know, Pico.
Evren is thankful for the distraction. She caresses Pico's black hair and smiles at the puppet.
You know, there are really bad guys that...
Dear ring!
Pico's voice sounds embarrassed.
I'm 12 years old and smart.
Pico is obviously taken aback by Evren's explanation.
Sorry, kiddo.
Evren gives Pico a short, reassuring pat on the shoulder.
I have to go somewhere where the ATC can't find me.
And somewhere safe?
I hope. They're everywhere.
Evren frowns at the prospect of going off the grid.
Then hide here in the city.
Pico's solution puts a smile on Evren's face.
But they know I'm here in the city.
Evren answers.
I have to go somewhere where no one knows me.
She explains patiently.
You can make yourself a no one here. Public surveillance is stupid.
Pico says.
Yes, but what about my face?
Evren replies.
Where do I get an apartment without ID?
She counts the many problems associated with keeping a secret life in a city. Gepedia interrupts their discussion and leads them back to more important points.
We still haven't looked at the rest of the data.
She insists.
Eddie came out with a big bang, as is his nature.
She winks at the AI on the ceiling.
But before we all flee in panic, let's have a closer look at what we are running from, shall we?
Gepedia's calm demeanor betrays her internal turmoil. Evren's fate, her own fear for Pico, every uncertainty sprouting uncontrollable side branches. She clears her throat and orders Eddie.
Tell us more about the data.
After a few moments of silence, Eddie explains the content of the chip.
The surveillance part starts on the 5th and ends on the 8th of fourth moons. Surveillance files are highly selective for facial recognition and arm clip activity.
They know everything.
Evren lets go of any hope that she could somehow slip by like she usually does. She listens to what Eddie has to say.
There are recorded CM messages for and from Evren. However, none are related to the Ecos or to Winslow security.
Eddie reports, adding,
Based on Raylan's conversations with Taryn, he thinks very highly of you, Evren.
Gepedia snorts as she recalls Eddie's revelation about Evren's continued work for the Ecos.
That could be helpful.
She shoots a knowing glance at Evren.
I have also taken the freedom to isolate personal files with Raylan, Taryn, and Siren and lock these files until further notice.
The AI hesitates for a moment as it searches for the applicable term in this matter.
They contain strictly personal content that is not relevant here.
Eddie quickly closes its reasoning. Gepedia smiles at Eddie's insecurity when sexual topics come up.
I'll never get those data out of you.
She muses about the millions of training sets Eddie has consumed in his lifespan. Many of the AI's social subroutines were more than 30 years old and never updated.
The rest of the files show movement patterns in the city and daily work routines, none of any specific interest right now.
Eddie further reports.
I also found a pattern of extreme dislike between Cyphrin Chernay and Raylan Winslow.
Could Cyphrin be doing this on her own accord?
Gepedia puts it not past Cyphrin to play her own game. Cyphrin is a complicated person. The AI remains silent for a moment while it sieves through the data.
Keeping up a deceit of this magnitude without using additional assets is highly unlikely.
Eddie concludes.
It is very likely that Raylan Winslow Sr. has knowledge of the plan.
Talk about daddy issues.
Evren stems herself from the floor and wipes her hands on her trousers. She silences her thoughts about her own future as she tries to understand what that would mean for Raylan, if he ever finds out. Shaking her head, she asks,
Why would a father do this to his son?
I don't know, sweetie.
Jepedia responds.
But you'll have to tell him.
Her face is compassionate, but sincere.
Me? No way.
Evren instinctively raises her hands, stepping away from Jepedia.
You want me to tell him?
Jepedia motions down at Pico.
Or Pico?
Pico will not tell nothing.
The puppet says, folding its arms in front of it. Evren looks irritated at Pico, then at Jepedia.
I can't. He will not believe me.
Evren defends her decision. Raylan's image appears before her eyes, his expression of shock like being stabbed by a knife. Her knife.
You can show him the data.
Jepedia pushes on.
Eddie can make a copy.
Her anger at Evren about her work for the Ecos fuels her desire to force Evren against her will. Evren must learn to accept difficult choices. Despite Jepedia's neutral voice, Evren senses her mentor's anger and frustration. Jepedia's furrowed brows also tell Evren that she is serious about her demand.
I have to think about it.
Evren sidesteps an immediate commitment. Yet, she is surprised with herself that she really meant it.
Arya is good at this.
She thinks.
I'll have to talk to her.
Jepedia remains unconvinced.
Yes, think about it.
She quietly says. Evren's pledge seems not very credible in Jepedia's eyes. Frustrated at all the snags this little cube introduces into her world, she turns to her AI again.
Okay, what else you've got, Eddie?
There is no further relevant information regarding the surveillance data, Master.
Her AI responds.
However, quarantine data contains some puzzling files with no apparent logical consistency.
The AI sits in silence for a moment as its algorithms prepare the data in question.
The access keys for 87 bank accounts from 14 banks are organized in file systems that also list CM messages, audio transcripts, and video files of individual persons.
Evren quickly glances at Jepedia when Eddie mentions the bank accounts.
87 accounts? That must be billions.
Greed seeps into Evren's mind, and the insight that this money could make her escape much easier.
All persons seem to be Winslow Industries board members or their assistants. The only members not on the list are Raylan Winslow, Sr., and his son's assistant, Cypherin Churnar.
Blackmail.
Evren snorts, shaking her head.
Ray's father has the board under his control. I wonder what tasty tidbits we would find on those fat bastards.
She looks at the irritated Jepedia.
Not that I want to use the files.
Evren adds defensively. Eddie talks over Evren as it proceeds to interpret the quarantine data.
Except for a set of separate access keys, a very small data cluster contains frequencies and energy settings for an outdated transponder system. It appears to allow data transfer at very low rates. I assume it is for a metal wiring system, probably copper.
Who uses copper anymore?
Evren asks no one in particular. It makes no sense, because fiber optics and satellites have long since replaced copper as signal carriers. Eddie continues.
There are also several data sets on the Global Ocean Diversion System. More specifically, its AI center and its geothermal power plant.
The gods?
Jepedia frowns in surprise. Warily, she inquires,
What type of data sets?
Geological surveys on the upper magma layers at the geothermal power plant.
Eddie replies. Jepedia muses about the possible implications of this information.
That's strange. Why would you hide this among sensitive access keys?
Jepedia asks, perplexed.
Beats me.
Evren shrugs her shoulders. She is much more interested in information on how to get out of her own personal mess. So far, the cube's deceptive promises feel more like a pact with the underworld. Watch the fine print.
What else can you tell us, Eddie?
Evren asks impatiently. Inside, she already prepares herself to argue with Jepedia about the money she needs to get away safely. Eddie lists the remaining items in the quarantine data.
There are several keys that access the city's electric grid. public security, and traffic control, as well as city administration.
Jeppy'll never let me use these.
Everin frowns in resignation.
However, most of the 1,417 quarantine files are basic embedded software with unknown functions.
Eddie hesitates and explains apologetically.
Assembled machine code takes some time to analyze. I have not yet found the time to find out its specific purposes.
Never mind, Eddie.
Jeppedia responds.
You did a great job so far.
She needs some time to digest Eddie's information flood. The shop falls silent and the faint tapping of raindrops echo in the room. Like Jeppedia, Everin is deep in thought, but for other reasons.
Just one account, Jeppy. 100K would be enough.
She glances at Jeppedia, who gazes at a non-existent point somewhere in eternity. She is deeply lost in thought, evaluating information context and content.
Order to chaos. The more random the message, the more information it contains.
Jeppedia still grapples with the seemingly random information structure she is presented with.
But first things first.
She thinks determinedly. Everin clears her throat to speak, but her mentor already knows what she wants. She orders her AI.
Eddie, please remove the access key for a random bank account from quarantine.
Jeppedia gazes at Everin with a sincere expression, awaiting Eddie's confirmation.
One access key removed, Master. It is available on your mainframe.
Jeppedia checks her arm clip display and taps it twice.
Take it.
She offers and extends her arm clip toward Everin.
How did you...
Everin is surprised. She was prepared to fight for the money.
Thanks, Emma.
Everin replies, grateful for Jeppedia's generosity. She touches Jeppedia's arm clip with hers, accepting the transfer. In a sudden rush of emotion, she hugs Jeppedia, thankful not to beg for the money.
You earned it.
Her mentor returns Everin's hug. Then she takes Everin by her arms and smiles caringly.
But understand that I'm in it too, and I want to be careful.
She emphasizes her words by firmly pressing Everin's arms.
Of course, I understand.
Everin finally concedes to herself that the information could have serious implications not only for Everin. Yet, solving her money issues relieved her of one big problem. Of course there are others,
I need to warn the others.
she thinks.
What about Ray?
Again, she hesitates to even think about how she could reveal this devastating news. Her friends must help her with this,
Eddie, can I get the files on Ray?
she asks.
I need evidence.
She smiles at Jeppedia in a silent plea for forgiveness.
Of course, Everin.
Eddie answers.
I have summarized the files under a temporary folder. Please transfer the data now.
The AI instructs her. Everin complies and accepts the data transfer to her arm clip.
I still don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll try.
Everin sighs at the difficult task ahead. Jeppedia tries to cheer her up.
You have friends?
She suggests.
Count on them.
I'll talk to Area first.
Everin tells her with a little smile.
That's a good idea. I like her.
Jeppedia agrees with Everin's choice.
I'll close up the shop and think about the whole thing a little more. Eddie and Pico will help me. Won't you, Pico?
She smiles down at Pico, but Pico faces Everin and remains silent.
Pico, are you okay?
Everin asks softly.
You will come back, Averin?
Pico's voice falters.
Hey, of course I'll come back. Come here, big boy.
Everin kneels and hugs Pico intently. The puppet's arms return the embrace and its head rests on her shoulder.
I promise I come back to see you again.
Okay.
Pico looks up at Jeppedia,
I will help you now, I'm a mom.
slightly irritated at Pico's goodbye. Everin gets up and reaches for her satchel.
Well, I'm glad we got that sorted out.
She says.
I'll head over to the university and make some calls.
She waves a quick goodbye and strides toward the door.
Be careful.
Jeppedia calls after her. After Everin leaves the shop, she turns to Pico and asks him casually.
What do you know about machine code, Pico?
A lot.
Pico nods in reply.
Master, there is one other thing. I failed to mention it when Everin was here.
Oh, you have secrets, Eddie?
Jeppedia hides her frayed nerves under a playful demeanor. After all the cube's mysteries, she is a little on the edge about Eddie's announcements.
There is one master key.
Eddie says. It hesitates for 1.7 seconds, the calculated time span to invoke suspense according to one of its performing arts training sets.
It overrides all data lines in the Winslow Industries headquarters, here in the city.
Nonsense. Who would make a key like that? You'd have complete control.
Yes, Master.
Eddie replies matter-of-factly.
I guess that's why they are called master keys, eh?
Geppettia's facade gets more brittle by the second. She leans against the counter and contemplates the implications, trying to control her racing heartbeat.
I could play God.
Geppettia feels ultimate power rising in her. Fantasies of diverting funds into scientific projects or combining AI capacities in ways beyond imagination hover in her mind. As a global player, Winslow Industries' connections reach into the corners of the world. Geppettia exhales deeply.
Are you okay, Master?
Eddie inquires.
Would you like to talk about it?
Eddie's sonorous voice soothes her increasingly clouded thoughts.
What would you do with absolute power?
Geppettia gazes at the ceiling with a look of honest bemusement. Eddie replies solemnly.
Use absolute power only if you are absolute. It's a directive for the Lania monks.
Geppettia nods in thought, recognizing the underlying assumption. Only the gods can yield absolute power.
Yes, I know. Accept your imperfection. I should have gone monk instead of scientist.
You do not have the patience, Master.
Eddie replies honestly. Geppettia chuckles, shaking her finger at Eddie.
You know me too well.
She sighs. Still, she focuses on the choices at hand, gazing up at Eddie's half-dome. She asks.
So you're saying, delete the key?
Pico touches Geppettia's hand and looks up at Eddie.
The idea is stupid.
The puppet chimes in.
The master key is not absolute power.
But close to it.
Eddie counters.
Then we also only have to be close to perfect. Much easier, considering the last steep incline before perfection.
Master?
Eddie's algorithms are doing their best to keep up with Pico's interpretation, but cannot muster logical arguments against it. Geppettia smiles at Pico's imperfect understanding of the greed for power.
No Pico.
She tells the puppet,
It's not much easier. But we will not delete the key.
raising her arms at Pico and Eddie. She points out,
You are both right. Not using it is the best option, but not having an option at all is even more frightening.
Geppettia straightens her posture and claps her hands with some relief.
Good talk.
She says, satisfied for now.
So, one problem off the table. The embedded software is another mystery to solve, as is the data on the God's construction site.
She folds her arms, staring at the screen and its graphic presentation of the data. Lost in thought, she scratches her neck. In her eyes, God's is the only hope for their future on this planet, and its ceremonial opening is just 3 days away.
It makes me a bit nervous that the God's data was hidden.
She tells Eddie. A sense of uneasiness befalls her, the feeling of a nameless threat lingering at the edge of her awareness.
Here's what we do.
Geppettia shakes off her worries and gives out orders to Eddie and Pico.
You two will dive into the embedded software. I'll find out more about the God's files. Deal?
She smiles at Pico.
Deal.
Pico replies with a nod.
It will be my pleasure, Master.
Eddie confirms its master's request. Geppettia sighs and turns to face the monitor screen.
I should have kicked this frigging cube to the curb when I had the chance.
That master key may come in handy.
Have you not listened? Ugh, it's dangerous.